I think the purpose of table talk is to improve their interoception. So we're using both touch and language to help people come back into their bodies and make sense of their body sensations. We know that when somebody makes sense of what is going on inside their body, whether they understand it or not, but it makes sense to them, they're far more likely to come out of a threat response and be in a neurological safety response where they're in a hyper learning environment. So this is your people who will say things like, well, damn, that makes so much sense. Like, I just never thought of it like that. Or, well, now that you say that, let me tell you this, right? You almost watch them like build this puzzle of understanding. And usually it's not actually a ton of information you've actually told them. Very often it's something on the table that you have probably felt or displayed to them. As Don said, he's the narrator of play-by-play of what's going on in the nervous system for him. And as he narrates that through to somebody, they say, well, now that you say that, let me tell you what happened 15 years ago, or let me tell you as I was a kid, or I've been, they'll come back the next visit and they'll say, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. So to me, when you hear feedback like that from your practice members, you're already doing this incidental teaching. You're already getting them to process a bunch of things in their body that perhaps in the past have not made sense to them, but are starting to make sense of them. We do this with the kids in our practice better than the adults because they don't have the language adults have. So we're asking our kids to really talk less and feel more. And sometimes they don't even need to tell you because you're all chiropractors. Nobody really needs to tell you where to adjust them, I would think. Not that they don't try and not that they don't make an opportunity to tell you like what you should be doing, but typically you don't need that. What you're trying to get them to do is appreciate the fact that just because there's an acute feeling in a particular part of their body, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's where their challenge is, that's where their protection is, that there's this global protection going on that we're noticing. And when a body is in global protection, it's in threat, and a body in threat breaks down for energy to survive. What that breakdown looks like is individual. And that's where the table talk comes in, because really you're play-by-playing the breakdown you observe, the breakdown you feel, and conversely, you're also breaking down where those ease or those tissue safety areas that are coming back online are, so people can also feel the difference. Because I think Michael had asked, like, what's another word for safety? Because nobody's ever asked people if they feel safe. And so that ease word that is a chiropractic word is really the word we use all the time. But if we don't point out ease to people, most people, back to like the kids being naughty all the time, when the body is constantly just an alarm signal, people don't actually know what ease feels like. It is a bizarre foreign feeling to them. And you actually have to draw their awareness to that. Because as they go away from the office, you want them to come in and actually tell you both things, both where the protective feelings are or where the threat feelings are, or whatever the language is that you use, the breakdown, but also where the ease or the safety is. Because building that for people is what interoception is, and improved interoception is improved well-being. So when you just tidbit this information, you drip it through every visit, that to me is now today through this lens what the purpose of table talk is. So, Dr. Don.
Amen. And like I said, Lex is here looking out the window half the time, so he's just waiting for someone to bark at. So Brandi might have to kick in if he starts yapping away at things. As far as the table talk, again, we always want to go back to concepts. Concepts are going to be the most important thing. We want to have individual conversations with people. Like we said before, we would usually just kind of get our point across to people and tell it to everyone. And whether they were ready for it or not, we were just telling them different parts about chiropractic so that they would understand the chiropractic story. And I think the whole thing about this is if we can take some of those major concepts of the polyvagal and be able to tie them into our conversation, again, it just starts to open their mind, because one of the biggest things is if we can make things make sense to people. I think in general, that also puts their mind at ease. And when their mind's at ease, because again, a lot of times they come in and go, I don't know what's going on, or things don't make sense to them, or other people say that there's nothing wrong with them and they're feeling something different than what or they're being told there's nothing wrong with them, but they feel different. And that makes it really tough for them as well. So I would just think, what are some of your favorite concepts? Like maybe just write in the chat, like for people, like what are some of your favorite concepts that you love about the polyvagal theory? Because we often don't have a struggle with our top concept that we love, but usually it's the struggle on the concepts that aren't as exciting to us. And I think from some of the questions that we had in the chat in the Facebook group, a lot of people like the kind of like the people who have that stress love language, or the people who like to talk about stress. They have that they have that's a lot easier for them to talk about, but structurally or sometimes functional wise, they have a hard time talking about that. So if you know where your favorites are, we obviously don't have to work on that. We just have to make sure we're talking to the right people about that. Because if I come in and talk about like putting your mind at ease so that you can live to your full potential to some rig worker, they're like not really gonna care about that at all. Where do you feel?
Carol's like, we need to learn co-regulation before we can self-regulate. Talk about where do you feel it? What does it feel like from a stress ease paradigm?
Perfect. Well, we'll get into those concepts as we go through, because we'll talk about in the vitality shift, we talked about the different avatars, but we're going to just talk about some of the different concepts as far as what people would be more like open to listening to, or something that would actually flip in their head. And so before, we always used to talk about the sympathetic parasympathetics, right? So we do, the sympathetics are bad and parasympathetics are good. Now, often we'll talk about, in our mind, we'll talk about danger and safety, or we can talk about ease and tension. And this is a really basic concept that I always will do even on the first visit, and then always bring it back even to different areas of the body, because people, not one person ever has complained or said that doesn't make sense to me to say that the body does not heal in a state of ease. And once the body gets into a state of ease, it doesn't immediately heal either. So I've used an example of, if you come up to a flower garden and this flower garden's been like totally abused and these plants are like looking ill, I can't just put some water on it and take some of the, like get some sun on it and it just immediately changes. What I need to do is I need to get a state of safety throughout the whole system and have that state of safety long enough so that things can actually heal. So once that ease starts to be more sustainable, that is actually when the healing starts. And when we talk about segmental subluxation, usually things that you feel in a segmental area are the things that will create ease quicker, and longer term ease is going to be what's taking that systemic subluxation, which is like digestion, like all the stuff that we know when the whole vagus nerve is functioning properly, that takes longer. So it's just trying to get a timeline on getting ease in the first place, and then sustained ease, which then allows the body to heal.
I think a lot of people, some of the questions about table talk speak to the fact that if you don't understand the two big premises of polyvagal, like these two big premises, it will be really difficult then to have the conversation with a bunch of different personalities and different value systems. There's really only two major premises in polyvagal, and it's safety and danger, really. And that your autonomic hierarchy is determined based on the perception of whether the body is in safety or danger. And everything cascades from there. So the autonomic hierarchy really is the major premise. If we talk about the major premise of polyvagal, that is that if you always have that at the back of your mind, then when somebody asks a question like, well, why isn't this getting better? Or why is this not happening? Or because we're most challenged with people that are most challenging to us. So it's people who challenge you either on, like Dan was saying, either on how long this is supposed to take, how quickly it's supposed to happen. It's not working. They're not feeling better in a certain way. They're feeling worse in a certain way, right? So the challenging people are typically going to be people who don't necessarily see the world the way that you do. And obviously the easy ones, we think we're crushing our communication with. So we don't get questions about the ones that you are crushing your communication with. We get them around the people that are just not like you. And I love, and Michael said he talks about turtles, like turtling in or exploring. I mean, that's the, like all those pictures for people are so powerful because this autonomic hierarchy, it's funny. I often will also, I mean, I'm not at the table, but on a new patient visit, I'm trying to set the premise. I'm trying to set the premise for every other visit after that. The major premise is I understand what you think it is that we do. However, I'm about to now sort of talk you through the process on what it is that we're actually looking for. And so, recognize that the majority of people do come into your office thinking there's a bunch of bones that are like need to be banged back into place. And by virtue of banging these bones back in, all of a sudden they feel better. That's sort of what they're imagining chiropractic to be. They have no clue that this is such a major concept for people, that we're really looking at a danger protected state over a long period of time that is now breaking down the body in a numerous areas so that it can survive.
Well, and I think too, the key part of what on my first visit is I want to demonstrate global protection or tension with the postural tension test. And then after the first adjustment, demonstrate global ease, like in a temporary state. And then I want to also demonstrate segmental protection on the first visit, and then demonstrate to them what it feels like to have a segmental ease as well. And I always think of that as the introduction to create that contrast, because most people have always been in a state of protection and they don't even know what it feels like to get into that state of ease. And I often will say what we need to do is I want you to become aware of what it feels like so that you can tell what the difference is, because most of the time they don't even know. And it's not even until you bring it to their attention. So a lot of times when you do that postural tension test, like we almost have to keep them there for a while and almost have to lead them through their body with their mind. And then it's funny because as they're standing there and they start to like pay attention, like you can see their eyes kind of light up because they're like, ooh, and then I feel here and I feel tension in my calves and I feel the weights on the front of my feet. Like they slowly start to feel stuff in their body. And I think that is the biggest introduction at the beginning. And then we can kind of just keep on building on that all the way through all the other visits.